So very center dot width, and we want to do the same again. So object height is equal to very center dot height. So now we can do exactly the same thing. We'll go ahead and alert out the object width and height, and this will actually match 150 and 250. So we need to make sure that that happens, because we need to be extremely accurate. So again, we can go ahead and say width x, height x. Obviously go ahead and just replace these x variables with object width and object height. So let's go ahead and refresh, and you see we've got width 250 and height 150, which nicely matches this, height 150, width 250. So we know that these values are accurate. We don't really have a way of testing that these values are accurate. Well, we do, but we're not going to do it. But we can just, you know, assuming that we've grabbed the absolute height and width of this object, which is the very center div, we know that we've defined them properties in here. So we know that width and height are working. Okay, so now what we need to do is actually calculate where we're going to place this div. So the very center div needs to be placed in the very center of the window. So what we want to do is we want to set the very center CSS, and remember I said earlier we specified, well, we can specify top 200 pixels or 100 pixels or whatever in here, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to set top to something here, and then I'm going to go ahead and set left to something here. So we need to set the top and the left to the very center of the screen. Now we can't just go ahead and supply window width and window height divided by 2, which we would normally think would work. So let's just go ahead and try that. So I'm going to say window width, oh no, this would be height because it's from the top, height divided by 2, and the left we can say window width divided by 2. Let's just go and preview that. You can see that we're a bit off because we've divided the height and the width by 2, so this corner here is half of the page width or the page height, and this same corner is half of the page width. But what we need to do is we need to subtract half of the value of the height and width of this object in order to place the middle of this div here at this point here, and then it will be absolutely central. So hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully I've explained it properly. So for the window height we want to subtract object height divided by 2, and for the window width we want to subtract object width divided by 2. So now when we go ahead and we refresh, you can see that's been placed in the middle because we've replaced this corner and we've subtracted half of this object. So we now see that the object is in the very center of the screen. Now we only have one more problem, and that is that when I go ahead and resize this, it doesn't actually move because we've set a static value for the height and the width of this object. So what we want to do is we want to go ahead and first of all call this function that will place it in the middle of the window, but that we then want to create an event handler for window which is resize. And this event handler, or the function inside here that I'm just going to outline here, everything inside here will be called every time we go ahead and resize the window. So for example, if I was to say alert resize has taken place, and I refresh, and then I start, you can see my cursor's over here, I start to drag it in, resize has taken place, and that's sort of like alerting all that out. I'm going to drag it back again, resize has taken place, so we know that every time we resize we have this alert box, you know, pop up. However, what we want to happen is move div, and that's it, because what's going to happen now is it's going to regain or re-grab the window height and the window width and the window height. The object width, I guess, isn't really important, that could be moved outside of the function. However, then we reassign the top and left values because we're calling this function every time we resize the window. So now when we refresh and we go ahead and resize, this value, this top and this left value in CSS is constantly updated, so we can, you know, move this around however we like, but it's staying in the center of the window. So just by using width and height and a little common sense with regards to these calculations, we can set the CSS top property and the CSS left property to these values every time we resize by just gaining the width and the height of the window as we actually resize the window. So again, quite a messy way of doing it. It would be better placed into a plugin, and then we could call the plugin on any object we wanted, and we could use this just like here, or this like that, you know, instead of actually going ahead and using the reference for very center. But you get the idea. If you know how to create a plugin, why not go ahead and try to place this into, or place this code or incorporate this code into a plugin. It's quite a useful way of centering things, particularly if you're creating more of a dynamic site that you want something to stay in the center, etc. So quite a useful you know, piece of knowledge of how to center something exactly, and then resize it or replace it every time the window is resized.